your dad passed away in '07.
Right.
How did you manage to navigate through that? How did that affect you?
Yeah, it was tough. And I know that's something you and I certainly have in common. And it's always difficult, and especially when it's unexpected.
Yep.
I think it makes it that much more challenging. Don't get me wrong; it's always difficult. But it was summer of 2007, and my grandfather passed away. And again, you don't want to say it was expected, but he had a lot of health issues. Mm-hmm. He was in and out of the hospital for a number of years. He was fighting cancer. He finally seemed like he was doing better, and then he made a kind of a turn there. And I remember, I think it was a rain-delayed Dover race where they actually announced it in the middle of the race that he had passed away. It was June 3rd of 2007. So we kind of got through that, and then a month and a week later, we had a family trip planned that afternoon. We had been planning it, and my mom and dad were really excited about it. I had planned it for probably over a year or so. My dad was trying to get his miles in to be a pilot. It was always a bucket list item that he had. He wanted to be a pilot and get his pilot's license. So every now and then he would go out, borrow this little Cessna prop plane, and he would go out and fly. So he went out that morning, July 10th, and took off that morning, and about 45 minutes into it, they reported smoke in the cockpit, and then shortly after, unfortunately, went down. So without a doubt, devastating. It's always devastating when you lose a loved one, but I'd say when it's unexpected like that,
yeah.
it's shocking.
Yeah.
And I think it taught me a few things. It taught me how to grow up really quickly. It taught me who's really important kind of in my life, and who really has my back and cares about me. And I think one of the kind of biggest things is relationship with my mom and I. It was pretty much the two of us together. You had family and friends, but it was really the two of us. And every night we'd have dinner at about 7:15, and we'd sit on these little futons and have dinner, and really built a great relationship. I would say those 2 or 3 years after. And it's you never want to say there's a silver lining in those sorts of things, but I think the relationship that I have with her and a lot of the people that I'm still close to today really came out of those 2 or 3 months after that.
Wow.
Yeah.
Man, that's. I remember when talking about the sudden shock of losing somebody unexpectedly. I forgot. It's been so many years. I'd forgot about that being probably the toughest part about it.
Yeah.
Who's helping you on? Who's the father figure, or who's the man in your life that sort of, because I know your mother's heavily involved in NASCAR, and she could have absolutely helped, steer your racing career. But what male figures were a big role in the next several years to kind of get you going?
Yeah, that's a good question. I had my mom for sure. We had, I'd just say, family, friends that were around and really supportive. I think eventually, kind of when I got over to the business side, being around people like Steve Phelps and Steve O'Donnell, and kind of male leaders and role models that I could look up to, I think were helpful. So, I'd say for the most part, it was really a lot of our just kind of friends in the Daytona Beach area that I was able to lean on.
Was your dad involved in your racing? You said he bought the cart, but how involved was he with you and your driving?
So it was my second year of racing the quarter midgets at the time. So I think we were all kind of learning together, right? It wasn't like we grew up in a racing family. We knew how to adjust the shock absorber, or the track bar, sway bar, whatever it might be. So all of that was completely foreign to us.
Because your dad wasn't in the racing business either.
He wasn't. No.
Right,
yeah,
right.
He was a doctor. But he always, he loved cars. He loved working on things. He had a bunch of, cool cars growing up and hobby cars that he worked on. And he always loved to tinker. So, when we got that quarter midget, he tinkered on it a ton. and we learned along the way. We'd go out and car wouldn't be that good, or the go-kart wouldn't be that good, and we'd slowly make it better. So, he was involved in, I would say the first year of racing quarter midgets, and then the first part of the second year too.
Yeah.
And he loved it, and he was passionate about it. I wish, looking back now, that he could have, seen me kind of go through my steps afterwards. And, I think being, that time, like anyone, when you're a teenager, you're kind of a brat, and you kind of, disconnect on a lot of things. And looking back on it, there are so many similarities that we have, and I hear it all the time, my personality and the things that I love to do that we had in common. We got to share some of that along the way, but I didn't really get into, cars and kind of working on things and all of those things until I would say, 18, 19, and 20. And I really got into it. And then I was like, man, it'd be cool to be able to share some of those experiences. But at the same time, we have so many memories. And, I think the cool part about it is he got to see me, in my first couple of years racing. And I think the last race was one of my first wins, which was really, really cool.
He was there?
Yeah, he was. Yep. He was there. It was, late June of that year, and he came out, and he got to see it. So
Yeah.
it was neat. It was
Do you
really
have something of your dad's that's like your, a memento or?
Yeah, we have some of his watches, some of his jewelry. I wish that there were things that we kind of saved along the way, and they're probably stored away somewhere in a safe that I probably don't know exactly where they're at. I think at the time it's just, and I'm sure you guys going through this too. You're emotional, and anything that you see that reminds you of him, it brings back a lot of memories. But at the same time, you got to get to a point where you kind of move on too. So I think I want to say I kind of disconnected myself from it a little bit. And, now that I've kind of got to a better place and recovered and healed, I've been able to go back and look at a lot of those
Embrace
things.
some of those things, yeah.
Yeah, we're actually, I pulled out my old quarter midget trailer a few months ago with one of my buddies.
That's cool.
And opened it up. And it was like going back in time. Not as impressive as this room, but it was like going back in time. And there are old setup sheets that say 2007 and 2006 on it. And there's a picture of my dad in there, and that was really really special.
Yeah.
So
I think you're right about that, man. When I lost my dad, I didn't want to, uniforms and his boots and stuff around, and I wasn't hugging onto that stuff.
Yeah.
It was like, I just went in a damn direction, right, as far away from it as I could. But now, all these years later, like I'm trying to get all this stuff back, and it's okay for it to be sitting in a room next to me, and it doesn't bother me even though it does have an energy, like I've got some boots of his, and I feel like the boots are the cool thing because he walked in them and he did so many things wearing those boots, and he would resole his boots. Like he wouldn't just get a new pair; he'd keep that pair and just have a new sole put on them. So
yeah. Was it a period of time where you could almost make that turn from?
It took a long time.
Yeah.
It took over a decade for me to get to where I would want that material, those material things.
Yeah.
And I appreciated them, and they didn't hurt. They didn't hurt.
Yeah.
To be around them or to like to look at it and be reminded. Right. It's there are those times though. Like this morning, I was looking at a book. There's this guy that came out with this book about the history of Metrolina Motor Speedway, and Dad raced there a lot, and so did Ralph. And so I'm reading this book, trying to learn as much as I can about them because this is a really well documented part of their lives that I know nothing about.
Sure.
And there's so many things every freaking page. I'm like, God, I want to know. Only Dad could tell me.
Yeah.
If Dad were sitting here, I could say, hey, who is this guy and why is he driving this car, right? And because everybody drove everybody's cars.
Yeah.
And I just, it makes me wish I could ask him to know more, right?
Yeah.
But
I agree. And it's like, I think we take this for granted sometimes, and we kind of talk about in the hallways. Mike Helton and a lot of these people have so many stories. And, I mean, your dad has so many stories. You have so many stories. You guys, talk about a lot of these stories. And I think you guys are doing a great job of being able to document it on a podcast like this.
We built this podcast is largely, I believe, people bringing stories to him about his dad that otherwise he wouldn't know.
Yeah.
I mean, like Ned Yost, a baseball manager, was sitting in that chair last week. He was telling us stuff and bringing stuff that mementos that he had collected years ago that you just don't have access to that anymore, and so that is a gift, and that's interesting to hear you talk about it, Dale. That it took a decade, because as you're saying that, it occurs to me that there are probably people every week trying to force you
Give you a
into-
picture or
give
something,
you
yeah.
something that maybe you weren't quite ready to
Yeah.
look at it yet.
Yeah.
You know,
I
and
mean-
everybody was well intentioned.
Yeah. So we're getting in the weeds. I don't want to wear you out about it, but the going to the racetracks
Right.
the next year with or actually that year
Sure.
going to the racetracks and the threes painted on the apron and
Oh,
all
yeah.
that. Oh man, it was. I was.
Was that tough to see?
It was great, but bad.
Okay.
You know what I mean? It was
Yeah.
like I love this. I want. I thought he was amazing.
Sure.
I love that everybody else wants to celebrate him and all that, but at the same time, it was so distracting.
Yep.
And
I bet.
It was
And-
weird.
And I remember every third lap
Yeah.
of every
Oh,
race,
that's right.
everyone
Yeah.
had the 3 up.
I love that. I
It
love
was-
that.
It was so
Yeah.
cool. And I remember the first couple of races after, I forget, it was probably Atlanta or something, and everyone put the 3 up.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just like you couldn't hear anything but the cars at the
Yeah.
moment. And it was emotional. Like it took you 4 or 5 laps to recover after
Yeah.
that. But it was special that year. And we were talking about it as I was walking in. Some of my favorite memories of watching you kind of growing up and racing. And it was, winning the race in Daytona in
Yeah.
August of that year, which
Yeah.
was insane.
Yeah.
Was crazy. So that was really cool to see. I know, I'm sure the months afterwards were really hard, but to be able to go back to Daytona and then win in that 8 car was insane.
Did you like that conversation with Ben Kennedy? Well, you could listen to the entire podcast because the Dale Jr. Download is available on all major podcast platforms.